lack of engagement with pharma medical education assets. And the other thing that I also found that is not uncommon to AstraZeneca, because it's the industry approach, is that sites are built, a lot of resource, a lot of money, a lot of time goes into them, and then they're chucked out on the next cycle. And that doesn't particularly help with our reputation either. So then May 2018, I was told, okay, fine, you came here, you told us it's toxic. What are you going to do to fix it? And I didn't really know, but I knew there was something in the fact that if we think about when our medications are sold to patients, although there's no monetary transaction, money changing hands, the point at which they're sold in terms of the healthcare professional getting the patient to buy into the use of that medication is basically, oh, here you go, here's a box, read all the stuff in the leaflet, off you go. And that is the worst possible way to communicate. And one of the reasons, there's loads of reasons, obviously service pressures, but one of the reasons that we could impact upon and we could influence was that relationship and that dynamic between doctor-patient and that doctor-patient relationship, in order to make sure that it's as efficient as possible so that more time could be spent on explaining the pros and the cons of medicines generally as a whole. So the way that was basically boiled down to was we need to have a platform that is for HCP education, and we need to have a platform that is for patient education. The project got carved up into two bits. And the first bit was obviously we're going to start with the HCP education because that's where we've got heritage, we've got knowledge, it's less high risk. So that was Interact, and Interact version 1 launched. And to give you guys, I mean, it might be useful for Byron to know, but to give you an idea of what Interact phase 1 consisted of, it was one therapy area, it was type 2 diabetes, it was 11 to 15 videos that stayed there for a year, and we got 8,000 unique users on that in that time, in that year. And we didn't do anything with it. We didn't update it. We didn't add more content. And then, so that the way that we got people and we drove people to that was through innovative marketing and ways of getting people to look at our content. And then basically this is the story so far in a bit of a slide. So 2018, December, it was literally just do something. It was very reactive. It was opportunistic. It was a training exercise. We had Declare coming. And I was told that we needed to prepare and do some stuff for cardiovascular risk. But I also said that, well, if the two other competitors have done this, then what's the point in doing the same? Because the other two competitors haven't moved the needle. So if we educate just on a very narrow spectrum of cardiovascular risk and what we want to communicate about, then there is no point, because it's not going to stick with the audience, because the audience still don't know really that SGLT2 inhibitors exist. So this was basically film some interviews, get some content, build a website around it. And then once a bit of money was put into it, it was don't mess it up. And it was launch MVP, minimal viable product. One of the other things that we're very keen to do in pharma is not go down the MVP route. It has to be absolutely perfect before it goes out. And then we never do anything, because things change, priorities change, people move on, things move on. But what that allowed us to do was test it, refine it, and establish a proof of concept so that then we can go back and get more investment, and we can scale more investment into this as a platform. Now, the first part, up until COVID, I used to have a nice animation on this slide that I actually built, but then I lost, and then it's removed now, but I can't find it. So, but then up until COVID, all of this was kind of like a nice to have. It wasn't really my job. It was just do it as an addition, do it as an extra thing. But then when COVID happened, we had the opportunity, and Alex basically told us and briefed us all. So look, go big, go home, not in quite so many words, but in the way that we think, we need to think big. So it allowed us to pause, take stock, and rapidly accelerate content creation. Therefore, we stretched out into respiratory, cardiovascular, renal, so cross-therapy area. And last week on Friday, we've had the first call to get sign-off for oncology, also coming onto this site. So that's fantastic news. Finally, we've got a cross-therapy area platform. And how can we leverage the power of that? The interesting example for that is we're going to provide content. If it's a Venn diagram of the breathless elderly patient who may have COPD or may have heart failure, we're going to provide content around that sweet spot where they overlap. And they only need to go to one place to get a consistent voice and message and clarity of branding from AstraZeneca. The other part that allowed us to do was really cement the medical and the IBEX collaboration. And that's why, obviously, Rachel and I have worked quite closely, and Matt in her respiratory counterpart. And then half two was about maximising reach via legal and commercial partnerships. And I'm going to come on to that in a second. But one of those was a partnership with GP Notebook Pro. And there's also one with Boots that has been signed, which Laura's on the call, and she can talk about that because she's aware about that, and she kind of really led that and drove that. But now we're in 2021, and it's got to be change the game. How do we build up enough brand equity in what we're doing so that we get a trusted, useful, and most importantly, used resource? Because there's no point in getting minimal numbers, minimal engagement. We can revolutionise medical care, thought leadership expertise, and have outright UK medical leadership. And I see that as a cross-functional thing, even though it's not, say, medical marketing, because we come on to that in a sec, where we are building a world-class digital medical marketing capacity. And that means we take the expertise from commercial colleagues who are marketeers, and this is their day job, whether they be in IBEX or in the brand teams. But then we're going to build on this foundation in this platform. So this bit, we got, when this slide was made, it was wrong. It was up to date then, but this is an old slide. So we ended on about 8,000 unique users, 1.2 of whom returned, and they did 10,000 sessions. And then we want to get that was projected, but it's all signed and it's happening now because we're on a run rate where that's going to actually happen. So
And Kish, if we were if we were to want to understand, for example, how well different videos are doing, or for example, how well the cardiology videos are doing versus diabetes.
I'm coming to it. I'm just setting up. I've got that as well. They're not as pretty because I haven't finished it yet. But so what I'm building towards is we've now got the opportunity. COVID has given us the opportunity to actually use these technologies. And yes, it's a bit of a winding path. But if AstraZeneca can be on this road, trailblazing with all the competition, then I'd suggest it would be a very good competitive advantage to have. So I'm going to talk you through the numbers, and I'm going to put it like this so we can all see each other now. Hold on. Can I see? Yeah, there we go. Cool. So,
Kish, can I just ask, with regards to what does a session equate to?
Okay.
When you've got 10,000 sessions, is that kind of...
So it's visits and times that they spend on the website.
Okay, so a session is every time one person comes to the site. So 10,000 sessions is probably not 10,000 users because people are returning, but a session is every one time someone comes to the website.
So, yes, and this is, so the, hold on, just give me questions. What I'd like to do is just before I go through the numbers so I can explain to people, because we're already getting loads of questions, which is great, loads of interest, but I'd just like to let you know, and I can share the screen to show you because I think it's better to do an example. So GP Notebook is so that's all the Interact stuff, okay? Interact is an AstraZeneca platform. It is our IP. We own it. But it's obviously been built in a way that we can bolt on new stuff, whether it be diabetes, cardiovascular, oncology, whatever, right? So that's really important. So a part of, in terms of the way that we've been approaching an omnichannel perspective, is to make sure that we firstly have our own digital footprint and our own digital infrastructure, because otherwise it's not sustainable. The second part is through these partnerships. So this is a live website. It's been signed off. It was a significant investment from AstraZeneca, and you can go on gpnotebook.com/pro to have a look at this. And it's broken at the moment because we've this part of it's broken because we've updated the quiz functionality on the website. So it needs to be something to do with the servers. I don't really understand, but it needs to be updated. But what we had was when people are on GP Notebook Pro, which is different from GP Notebook, and that I'll tell you how that is. GP Notebook is a clinical reference tool that people use like Wikipedia in consultations, and GPs go on it. We've got 93 maybe % penetration of the 42,000 out of 44,000 GPs in the UK. So we've got massive numbers. It's basically the number one go-to place to talk to primary care, not just GPs, anybody in primary care. And that's why Tom's constantly mentioning it in terms of a good partnership and collaboration, because they've got the clinical reference tool that is 25 years old, that started on floppy disks with thousands and thousands of notes and pages written by 2 junior doctors. But they've also got GP Notebook Pro, which is a thing where people can build their CPD portfolio very easily. And the way that they do that is if GPs go on the site and they look at a page for 2 minutes, all those 2 minutes add up. And what GP Notebook Pro allows them to do, hold on, sorry, it's just a patient. Give me one sec. David, I'll call you. Oh, sorry, Avi, let me call you in 12 minutes. I'm really sorry. Thank you. Cheers. Okay, so what GP Notebook Pro allows us to do is aggregate all those views. Every time somebody goes to GP Notebook and say, I don't know what the NICE guidelines are. I don't know how to diagnose heart failure. What is CKD again? I know it's something about kidneys or, protein. What is it? I don't understand. Every time somebody goes onto GP Notebook, they can sign up, which is a paid service, but not yet. But they can sign up and pay for GP Notebook Pro, which is a CPD management aggregator. And the reason that this is brilliant is because if they sign up to it, they get all the Interact functionality on their dashboard, which is showed on this diagram here. But also, more importantly, it's not visible here, but our website was present on this site. So they could see everything on Interact on this site in a functional, usable way. So now that I've covered Interact and GP Notebook and GP Notebook Pro, has anyone got any questions on that before I talk through numbers? Because that is critical to understand before we go through numbers.
Kishan, just a very quick one.
Yeah.
When this first opened up, the presentations were really good, and we utilised them in training as well.
Yeah.
However, I picked up a lot more from working with the global team around launching Acto, which is an interactive training platform which they invested a lot of time and research in to identify the best way to learning for adults, and it was breaking everything down into shorter bite-sized chunks.
Yeah, so
first went live, it was sort of 60-minute.
Yeah. So that's
have you thought about this, and
yes.
Are you going to break it down into sections so
yes.
it's more manageable?
Yes, and yeah, so it's a fair flag, Andy, and I agree. The reason that although it wasn't ideal from I can't say the word, but from an educational pedagogy point of view, although it wasn't ideal, I agree, it was because we had limited funds and we had to do it. And also the driver at that point, when we didn't have the commercial partnerships in place, was CPD. CPD was the driver. So the currency was, if they watch it for an hour, they get one whole CPD point. So it wasn't mass market. We are looking at making more shorter form videos. Maybe Alex can talk about his work that he's doing in terms of CKD modules on Interact in a sec as well, because they're much more shorter, they're much more impactful, they're much more punchy. So I hope that kind of answers that, Andy.
Yeah, I mean, the only reason I'm throwing that one out there is, we've got a lot of experience in the global team around this now. Reach out to Click. I'm sure they will give you a lot of advice and support around it.
Okay, cool. Thanks,
I'm
mate.
just conscious of time.
Fine, yeah.
I know
I agree.
There are a few more questions.
So,
I think it'd be good if we could.
Let's rattle through the questions.
The numbers,
yeah.
Kish.
Okay. Yeah. Sure. No worries. So, there have been, as of week commencing the 2nd the 1st of Feb, 37,000 sessions. There's been 27,000 unique users. 10,000. Sorry.
Is that what period of time is that?
Okay, so hold on. It's helpful if I share this and show you. Give me 1 second. So we have, this is the GP Notebook Pro partnership is the thing that is driving usage at the moment, okay? So this bit here where we're flatlining is because we've done nothing, but this is actually quite important, this bit here, yeah? The flat line. Because we're flatlining, we've maintained, despite doing any marketing activity, despite doing any pushing it, despite doing anything, more content, we maintained a steady state of people, so it did not drop off. But then there's a 3-point acquisition plan. So the initial go live testing started the week commencing the 2nd of November with small testing, very small numbers. And then the phase 2, which was a larger target size, went 30th of November. And then phase 3 rollout to the entire UK GP universe was 4th of Jan 21, that should say, not 2002. But anyway, so you can see we're now in this phase where we're literally ramping up. So if this curve was like a pandemic curve, it would be too early to lock down because we're not quite at the peak of it, I would suggest. Does that help, Rachel?
Do you know how many of those have actually come from, say, GP Notebook Pro?
Yeah, this is 100% the GP Notebook Pro partnership that is driving this. Yes, there'll be some people, the heritage from the flat ones in terms of the 15,000 kind of users at this point, but the only difference that we're doing is the GP Notebook Pro marketing campaign and so there might be some people who remember it and go on it, but we reached a steady state of 15,000 sessions and just under 10,000 users, so 9,999. We reached that steady state of unique users by doing nothing for a period of probably 6 months, maybe, but while we were signing this and making new content and signing the deals and getting this stuff ready. So this is the primary and only driver of any significance is this Pro partnership. That's why it's absolutely critical to understand what GP Notebook Pro is before kind of delving into these numbers. Does that help, Verity?
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah, no, it does.
Cool. And then...
Kish, can I just check quickly? Is this like every week or is this like aggregated?
How do you mean every week or aggregated?
So is this like, for example, the 15,000 sessions, is that we're getting that every week?
No. This is aggregated.
So yeah.
This is cumulative. This is 100% cumulative. That's a bit weird. Who's that? Sorry, hold on 1 second. Hello? Yeah, hi.
Alex, it might be useful to go through, because I don't think they're live as yet, just with regards to the Ckd sessions.
Really bad time at the moment. Can we call back in like a couple of hours? I'm just on a work call.
Interact as well.
Thanks so much. Cheers. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, sure. I've only recorded one so far, which is basically an 8-minute overview covering the unmet need in the UK, burden on the patients, and what sort of differences treatment would actually make if you were to identify early. There's another few modules in the works that I'll be doing with a clinician on the kind of how-to for GPs in terms of, we're putting out all this content with regards to awareness, but we actually need to give them a bit of a playbook as to what to do with it. So how it's going to diagnose, once they've diagnosed, what is the appropriate way to manage, and then of course our underlying interests do run parallel to that. So within that, RAS inhibition, ACR testing, etc. So it kind of paves the way towards novel therapies. The only considerations that we have is when we start stepping into areas where we mention classes of drugs where we have a product, then I don't think we're still at a point where we've decided what we can and cannot do. So I think anything I feel will probably be having multiple takes.
How so?
We have.
How do you mean, Alex?
Well, we've been having discussions in the signatory forums as to what extent we can mention SGLT2 as a class. You're also aware that a lot of the clinicians who do the educational content with us are very keen to include that, because if we don't, then it's educational content about managing
Yeah. So the trouble that we had in the early stages of this is we were almost not current and up to date, and we weren't teaching people in a holistic manner because we completely neglected management. They didn't have anything about classes whatsoever. Certainly, if you look at what respiratory are doing, they've taken the view that class is okay. Is Shazad involved in those conversations from that signatory forum element?
Yeah, very much so.
Good, fine, because he's kind of made the decisions largely what's appropriate from a respiratory perspective, and I expect him to kind of carry through the same thinking into this. So
Alex, to your point with regards to content, so I'm just thinking out loud here. If we had, say, like the end user obviously going to view I'm saying it's your content, but you know what I mean.
It is your content, yeah.
The CKD specific content and then other kind of supporting modules. Obviously, I'm sort of thinking then, we would want them to take a specific, action point. So whether that's kind of, the increase of UACR testing, is there a way then when clinicians go on to Interact that then we have a way of then pointing them
Verity,
to like our MedEd disease
Verity,
awareness piece?
Verity, yeah. So what I'd say on that is when this was set up, in the future, that could be possible, but there's a bit of a problem with from a global digital governance point of view. So when Interact was set up, we were not allowed to create anything where we would have personal identifiable data and user profiles and registrations and emails and all that sort of stuff. We are in discussion with them in terms of trying to make that happen in a compliant way. But a big part of what we had to do was build the trust first, because then people, once they know us, they will then work with us and help us. And once they know us and trust us, they will then trust us with their information. And so at the moment it's difficult, but that's not the case, I don't think, for the whole of 2020, towards 21 even. Towards the back end of 21, I think we should be looking towards how can we do that. But also we need to bear in mind that Interact as a platform was never designed in that way either. It was designed as a broad disease awareness education tool that is to the bottom of the pyramid, i.e. primary care that have no idea and are not specialists, and then it builds them and it funnels them and narrows them towards more specialist content, similar to the slide that Byron put in the chat just now.
So, Kishan, we could build in some measures to do a knowledge check to see if whatever content they've used.
But yes, we could build in some measures and do a knowledge check, and we've got that. But then what we're not going to do with that is that knowledge check has to be for an educational purpose. It does not. So previously, when Byron's -2 incumbent was imposed, we were told that, wouldn't it be great to find out would people change heart failure prescribing as a result of this module? Yes, no. Do you want to more likely to do this? Yes, no. When we did that, the attrition cliff that we had was immense. It was 1,000 people. We had 1,500 people looking at our stuff and thinking about doing it. And we had 1,000 of them dropping off a cliff, not going as a result. So we lost 66% of people doing that. So the quiz functionality is there, and that's a big part of Andrew's modules, I understand, to be fair. I haven't looked at them much, but they need to have the questions afterwards and the validation from an educational point of view. But it can't be used to determine like marketing metrics and say we need to know whether people are going to change stuff, because what does it really mean? There's lots of biases in that.
There's no way of us understanding the numbers that you sent in terms of how many have actually finished a click.
Oh yeah, well we have. There's some more. There's some more. So I'm really sorry. It's 9:30. I've got to go in a second, but we've got a total of 30. Sorry.
Come on, we want
to Sorry, Andrew, what's typical?
I need to know the numbers that you sent me. So, with respect to the recommencement...
So what? No. What's typical, Andrew? It's 9:30. I've got to go to another call. I'm really sorry.
I can't get the numbers off you. I can't get any understanding of the numbers. I can't get the details of the numbers, and I can't interpret it.
Okay.
So, could you stay on the call and just answer a few questions?
Okay. What are the questions? Let's see. I think
we're going to have to take it offline with regards to more of the specific numbers. So I think what was really useful today, Kish, is to kind of give everyone the broad overview with regards to Interact and kind of the
I tell you what,
with regards
thank
to
you,
this.
Verity. Just before we wrap it up, I would say I was just trying to get to the point that we've had 13.1 thousand video plays. We've had an average video plays at 600. We're still breaking these numbers down, so we need to work on it. But the average video play duration is at 53%. So to Andrew's point at the beginning of this, even though it's 60 minutes for some of them, we're still getting an average of people playing this for 53% of the video. Now, we don't have more detail. We can't drill down on them. But what that should build towards is the fact that we're just starting out on this, believe it or not. We are literally only just starting out on this. These numbers, Andrew, are world class. Okay?
Did you share those numbers?
I've just shared them.
So in a file?
To what end, Andrew?
Well, the numbers that you have in the file, so that we can have a look at them.
When they are tested and finalised, yes. I mean, what I don't need, right, is... I think let's take Verity's point. No, don't laugh. Don't laugh. Like, you know, you've said you don't understand this, Andrew, right? The work that goes into compiling and aggregating these numbers to make sure that they are correct and accurate before they get fed up the chain is vital. And I'm not going to apologise for that.
No, so Kish, I don't think anyone's expecting you to apologise. I think whilst you've gone through kind of the numbers today, I think we probably need to take some time to consolidate that. My particular interest earlier was, I think it's a really valid point that you made around what would we want our end users to have as a specific call to action, and kind of getting the measure right of it still remains as medical education. Excuse me, it doesn't go down the route of promotion, because that's obviously where the users are kind of constantly returning because of the added value of the education that we're bringing. I think from a CKD perspective, where we're looking at driving increase of diagnosis, part of that would obviously driving the increase of UACR testing as well.
Yeah.
Is there something then with the new content that we could make it very specific in terms of what would you do next?
So that's Alex leading on that, and I think he's doing a lot on that in terms of, I don't want to talk for him and his work, but the bit that I've seen of it is excellent in terms of an 8-minute video that is a briefing, essentially, where he's up front and centre talking about AstraZeneca medical affairs. And then, so that builds credibility in AstraZeneca and medical affairs, because then he's interviewing Andrew Frankel. So the way that these things will be used is how you get those metrics. And I think you can get that from, it sits in Interact in one way, but then it also sits, for instance, on Twitter, or it sits on LinkedIn, because it will be signed off from a social perspective as well. And that is where Rachel is critical in this, because that from a medical point of view, yeah, Rachel, I'll see you later. Thanks. Let's keep talking. Okay. But you're going. So we need to, from a medical point of view, the strategy and the content needs to be bang on. Okay. From a CKD, diabetes, heart failure, whatever point of view. But then how that content is used and how it fuels the omnichannel journey is very much in terms of IBEC's remit, in terms of that providing that supporting consultancy look to the brand teams. Because otherwise...
I work with Rachel on that in terms of kind of, I suppose, the full ecosystem. Kish, I'm just conscious of time.
Yeah.
Thank you ever so much for joining us today with
regards
to going through kind of the history of Interact, some of the numbers as well specifically.
Pleasure.
Like I kind of outlined for the rest of the team, there's specific interest obviously from us from a CKD perspective. I mean, not just obviously CKD, but it's so pertinent at the moment with regards to driving our diagnosis, UACR testing. Obviously, we're going to have some additional work that will complement that in terms of the work that NAMA's doing from a policy perspective to get UACR back on QOF as well. We just had the draft CKD guidelines as well, in terms of kind of some of the prominence of revisiting testing. So I think you've given us food for thought.
Thank you. And Verity, the other thing I'd say is pick up with Laura, because what we didn't have time to talk about today was the way that content that she's made is now hosted on Boot's own platform through that's quite an innovative.
Okay, so as a different channel
No,
other than GP Notebook Pro.
Yeah. So it's pick up with Laura. She will tell you all about it because it's her project. But top line, we've come to an innovative intellectual property sharing arrangement where Boots will host our content that is branded Interact AstraZeneca on their site. So the views happen there, and then they report those metrics back to us. And that's where it's another complicated piece to make sure that all these aggregate numbers are correct, because it's not just on Interact, it's also on other sites like Boots, PCRS, Kagora, various other places. So I'm really sorry, guys, I've got to go, but thanks so much for the invite and the time. And if you need any more, Verity, just reach out, and I'm happy to jump back.
Probably have some offline discussions about this, but thanks everyone for joining. I will send some other bits in email for today.